but a lot of people have trouble figuring out, okay, so what exact naming system do I use? So there's two different ways. One is where I give you the formula and you need to come up with a name, right? The other is you're given the name and you need to come up with a formula. So I'm going to go through both of those and kind of try to simplify it. I will overly simplify it for you, in case you didn't catch that's my last name. So I will overly simplify it for you. Okay, and the very first thing I want to look at is if we have a formula and you're going to name. So I'm even going to write that here. Going from formula to name. Okay, now there's a couple things that you need to do. First thing, you need to have your, know your periodic table fairly well. But when you do this, what I want you to do is look at the formula. And very specifically, it's going to have symbols there, right? So I want you to look at the first symbol. And that first symbol is going to be one of three things. It either is going to be a metal. Now, if you know your periodic table, you know where that zigzag line is that splits the metals from the non-metals. If it's to the left of that line, it's a metal. If to the right, it's a non-metal. So it's either going to be a metal, it is going to be a non-metal, or that first element is going to be hydrogen. Pretty simple, right? Okay. So first thing, we looked at an element, identified it. Now, if it's a metal, here's what I want you to do. I want you to write the name of the metal. Name the metal. Write it down. And then you might need a parentheses. Okay, so sorry. That says, does it need a Roman numeral? Okay, that's what that says there. Okay. So you're going to look and see if it needs a Roman numeral. So if it's in the first column or the second column, you don't need a Roman numeral. You just wrote the name of the metal. The other possibilities are if it's silver, zinc, cadmium, or aluminum, you don't need a Roman numeral. If it's any of the others, it needs a Roman numeral. Put your parentheses there. Okay, you don't even have to get the parentheses yet. Okay, the next thing I want you to look, if the first element is a metal, following the metal, you're going to have an anion. It's going to be one of two things. It will either be monatomic, which means it only has one type of atom. Change. So you're going to change the element ending to IDE. So in other words, if you have nitrogen there, you would change it to nitride. Chlorine would be chloride. Okay. So you will do that. And then, now, if it's not monatomic, if it's polyatomic, you have a set of polyatomic ions that you should know. And then you might also have one where you have to determine whether it's an ATE or an ITE one. Okay. So you'll need to know the name of the polyatomic ion. Sorry, the easiest way on this one is just to know them. Okay, I'll give you a little hint a little bit later on one thing on that. But you just need to name the so if it's a polyatomic ion like carbonate, you're just going to put carbonate down. You don't change the polyatomic ion ending at all. And then finally, if you need a Roman numeral, and I put for the what goes in the parentheses, I want you to determine the charge of the anion, and based on number of ions of the cation and anion present, and then determine the positive charge. Okay, very simply. Now I'll go through some details of this here in a minute. Now, what happens if it's not a metal, but it is a non-metal? Well, there's one thing I want you to look for, okay? And I usually do this on a bigger board, and I'm going to try to fit it all onto this one board. All right, so for the non-metal, the first thing I want you to do, now I want you to look, and you're going to look for something specific. If the first element is not a metal, I want you to look and see, is it ammonium? Ammonium is going to be NH4. It might be in parentheses. So if yes, name it like the ionic compounds, ammonium, and then you're going to go over and find the anion and name it. So if it's not ammonium and you're seeing it in this class and expected to name it, you're going to have a system of two nonmetals, okay? You're going to use prefixes. So if it's not ammonium, you're going to use the prefixes mono, di, tri, tetra, etc. And you're going to determine the number of the first element and the number of second element. So it goes number, prefix, number, the numerical prefix of the first element, followed by the first element. And then, I should put it over here, but I'm running out of space. And then the number prefix, second element, for the second element, we will change the ending to IDE. So the first element always gets its whole name unchanged. The second element always ends up in IDE. So if I have NO2, okay, that would be mononitrogen dioxide, although I can skip the mono, okay? Finally, if you look and you see that first element is a hydrogen, you're like, uh-oh, it's not a metal or a non-metal. Hydrogen actually doesn't fit into either of those categories. Hydrogen can act both, although technically it's a metal. So we're going to look at hydrogen, and what I want you to do when you see this, I want you to count elements. I didn't say count atoms, count elements, okay? And if it's two, also known as a binary acid, it's going to be hydro, the element name, followed by ic, followed by acid. Very simple. Again, I didn't say it's easy. I just said it's simple. Hydro, whatever, ic acid. If it's three or more, we say this is an oxy or ternary acid. What we're looking at is an H and a polyatomic ion. So you will look at that polyatomic ion and determine its name. And if it's an ATE polyatomic, we change it to ic acid. If it's an ITE polyatomic ion, it changes to OUS acid. So what if it was like hypochlorite? If it was HClO? HClO is hypochlorite. Hypochlorite ends in what? ITE. So I would change it to OUS acid, hypochlorous acid. Notice that hypo identifies the polyatomic ion versus hydro, which does not, okay? So there's only a couple letters difference between hypochlorous acid and hydrochloric acid, but they're very distinct, okay? This doesn't look too bad, right? Make it a little simpler to think through this, right? When we go from the formula to the name, we're gonna kind of go the other way around, all right? So this hopefully will be recorded and I will have it up on Canvas. Now, I guess I didn't go through one more detail. These particular courses are saved to the cloud, and then I have to do a conversion. Actually, I don't have to do a conversion. Zoom does it. It does a conversion, and